All right, so let's get right into this. Basically what I did here is dragged in the stems from my sync licensing course. This is from the scene closer template. I have different genres of different templates in the sync licensing course, and this is just the stems. Basically drug in all the sounds for this, the individual stems, and then I put them each in their own mixer channel. And what I like to do is separate my instruments. So I like to have all my main instruments here, then with my bass separate, and then my drums, and then from here I have my sound effects. I know crash is considered a percussion or a drum, but I like to have it in my sound effects because it is an impact. So I have everything pretty much individualized, and how I'm going to break down this mixing is into 3 parts. So basically what I like to do is when I'm actually making the beat, I use this channel rack here to do some leveling. So this is going to be some gain staging that I do before I actually have it into my mixer template. And then what I do is I go to my kick, I use the pre-computed effects, I use the boost a little bit to get the kick really hitting nicely. And I may do that with the clap and snare too, depending on how loud it is. And then I also just do, just a little bit of leveling within the channel rack itself. And then I put everything into the mixer. And then this is where I do a lot of my mixing. And then I like to highlight the last 8 bars because usually that's the most busiest of the track. All of the elements in the track are included together in this part of the track, so I like to mix using all of the elements put together. So I'll just play what that sounds like right now. I like to do my mixing into like 3 kind of steps. So what I do first is do the leveling. I like to get all my levels right, and then from there I'll do panning to get everything in its each own space. I like to give it a nice wide stereo field to have everything fitting in their own space within the mix. And then after that I'll add my effects like EQ. Most of the time I'm using subtractive EQ, which I'll show you a little bit later. And then I'll add my reverb, my stereo imagers and stuff like that, and any other effects like dynamic, saturation, compression, anything like that to give my mix a little bit more punch or a little bit whatever the track actually needs in that situation. So with this, what I'm going to do first is highlight everything and then listen to the actual track and see where my levels are hitting. So you can see in the master, and the master you're seeing, I'm not really giving myself a lot of headroom here. So if I want to master this later, which I'll go over in a different video. So what I like to do is get everything down so I have a little bit space in my headroom. I'm reaching for about -6 dB to 3 dB to have as far as headroom. That way if I add any dynamic plugins, I'm giving myself a little bit of headroom to use. And then when I have the mastering, I like to have at least -3 dB. That way I can add that extra punch and give that nice, exciting, wide mix within the master. So I'll go over that right now. So what I did was just bring everything down. I highlighted everything by hitting Control, and then I brought it down about -6 dB. So I have way more room now. So what I like to do starting from here as far as my levels is get right into getting my kick the loudest out of the mix. You can already hear the kicks hitting pretty well. And then from there, I like to get my drums to have that loudness as well, that punch. I like to have my drums in the front of the mix. What I'm going to do now is pretty much mix in the drums, and then I'll go from the drums to the instruments. All right, cool. So now what I'm gonna do is do a quick panning to everything. I have some panning already in this track, as you can see. Like the hi-hat loop here is panned to the left. So I'll do some light panning here to get everything its own individual space, and then from there I'll start adding in some subtractive EQ and adding some plugins to get the sound that I want. what I want to be careful here when I'm doing this panning right here is making sure that my kick or my clap and my snare are not too imbalanced. So there's not too much panning going on to the right side or the left side. I want it to have it pretty equal as far as the amount of dB that it has, about the amount of loudness it has. That way there's not any contrast within the mix as far as. So you can see my snare is a little bit punchier, or my clap is a little bit punchier to the right, so I'll bring that down a little bit and bring up the snare a little bit. All right, cool. So I have everything pretty much on a quick panning and volume level. I did everything pretty quickly. I have a nice balance as far as everything right now. So now I'm going to start adding in effects. So some of that volume may change within some of these sounds here. So what I like to do first is get my bass right. I don't like the way my bass sounds right here. And a good plugin that I use that is free is Camel Crusher. I really like using this preset called the British Clean. I learned this from a TikTok tip. This gives it a nice punch right there. There's some saturation added to it, like a little bit of distortion to bring it out a little bit. And then what I'm going to do here is add an EQ. So a lot of there's like 4.5 dB right here of this bass being added. So what I'm going to do is hit it with the low shelf, which is already a preset within parametric EQ. So I'm just going to bring down a little bit around 40 hertz, so that way it ducks off. And that's basically within 40 hertz and below, that's pretty much all muddiness. You're not really going to be able to hear that. So that's just energy that's being used up within the mix. So I want to clean some of that out. That way I have a little bit of room, but not too much, because it is my bass and I don't want to take out a lot of that sub frequency. And then also I'm going to bring down a little bit. I'm going to use a subtractive EQ. So what I'll do is I'll tighten up this band, just duck out just a little bit of dB, and then add about 100. So a good trick that I learned when I'm using subtractive EQ, I use it right here so you can see. When I'm using a band to take out EQ, I want the band narrow. But then when I'm boosting, I want the band a little bit wider. So you can see like this is a tighter band that's going to be cutting out that frequency for whatever range you're trying to cut out. And then that band that you boost back is going to be a little bit wider. So you can hear that without the. And I don't need a lot of this like too much of distortion here, so I'll use this high shelf right here just to duck out a little bit. Now this gives it a nice bass tone. And I don't want it too loud where it's overpowering my kick, so what I'm going to do here is start using this kick to take out about 100 hertz. That way it's not clashing, because I boosted 100 hertz on the bass. So I'm going to take out that same frequency here in the kick. And like I said, I like to have a tight band here, and then boost around 300 hertz. 300 hertz gives it a good punch. Now my clap, I want it to kick out, to boost out a little bit in the mix. What I'm going to do is boost a little bit the mid-high range. And I can go ahead and add a high pass filter to it, because there's nothing really down here being played anyway. Nice, so I have a good sound with my drums right now. What I'm doing now is just taking out a little bit this low end of the snare. You see this energy here? You don't really need this. You're not really hearing that. So I'm just cutting that out. I like to use shelves instead of high pass. So this is something I learned recently, because you don't want to cut out too much of that frequency there. Sometimes that energy that's being used in that frequency range is really good for the mix. So I don't like to cut it out completely in case it does help. Now we're going to balance out these instruments here. So I want my piano to sound a lot brighter. I don't need reverb. You can hear that it has a nice open wide sound. So I'm gonna add a stereo enhancer, add a little separation. I like to use FL Studio stereo enhancer, add stereo separation. I'm gonna add about like 19 to 20, and then I'll put an EQ on it. I want it to sound a little bit brighter. I'll take out a little bit of that low end, just barely a little bit. And then I want to do a little bit of subtractive EQ down here in case. What I'm looking for when I'm doing subtractive EQ, and basically I'm just cutting out certain frequencies, I'm looking for that peak resonance, something in the mix that is coming out and cutting through the mix that's not, it's really distracting, it's really, it's not good for the mix. It sounds too, there's too much resonance, there's too much frequency that's competing with the other frequencies inside the mix. So what I do is by sweeping, there's like a sub that's coming through here that I can cut out. I don't need too much. Now I want to fix the string right here. So like I said, this has a nice reverb to it. I just have a stereo separation on it with a little bit of EQing here. You can hear that right here. Look, if I solo this, you hear that. You hear that frequency right there? That's a lot of harshness right there. So we're gonna cut that out, about -4 dB. And then since I cut there, I want to boost a little bit to add some of that color back. So this is without those effects. A little bit more muddy. A little bit more dynamic range there. Now this pad right here has a nice bite to it. If I boost this, you'll hear it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take out some of this. First, I actually want to bring out that bite a little bit more. So I'll move this EQ down because I'm going to add an effect, and then I'm going to EQ some of the harsh frequencies out of it. So I'm going to use Decapitator. This is a saturation plugin. You can use any saturation plugin that you want. I heard FabFilter has a really good one called Saturn. I like to use Decapitator. There's usually really good deals on Decapitator. You can get it for like 29 bucks. They always have deals on this. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of drive to it. You can hear a little bit more crunch now within this mix. It has a little bit more crunch, and then I'm going to add a little bit of low cut to cut out those low frequencies so it's not competing with that bass. Add a little bit of brightness to it. You hear it sounds like more flat, more shallow here. This adds a little bit of bite to it. So I'm gonna cut a little bit of that low frequency out. And I want that piano to come out a little bit more as well. I'm gonna add a compressor to it. And I really like using this piano preset, tons of weight. And then I mess with the threshold here. That way it's not ducking out too much of my attack on that piano. Nice. So I have a good. That snare's hitting a little bit too loud. I'm just trying to get the bounce now back. Now that I added some of these effects, the bounce is going to be a little bit off because, you know, saturation is adding gain. There's gain staging. There's gain being added to some of these plugins. So I just want to find a good balance for everything and get my strings also cleaner a little bit well. I have string hits that are very subtle. Right here. So I just want to bring that out in the mix a little bit. Dope. So let's listen to this back. I have a good clean mix right now. Everything has its own place within the stereo field. I do think that I need to add a little bit of reverb to this string just to have it a little bit more wideness. So I'm gonna add that in here, and then we'll listen to this entire thing back. And so for your effects, the slot that you use does matter. So if I want to add a reverb, I want my reverb to I want to bring in this reverb and then it go through the stereo enhancer where it separates everything, and then from there I EQ it and have this EQ here. So I like to add it directly on the channel. I know usually people have you mix within a bus, but like I told you earlier in this video, mixing is subjective. You can mix however you want. This is just a process that I use, and I've used buses to mix in my reverb, and I just don't like the way that it blends out. Usually it sounds has too much of the wet signal and the dry wet signal. So I like to use this Lush preset. This is the Verb Suite Classics by Slate Digital. There's a Lush orchestra preset that I use here. I turn down the dry and wet, and I have a good stereo width right here, so you'll hear this. I don't want this reverb too much. So let's play that back. So let's play without it. Just adds more layers to it. Nice. This is a good mix. I like the mix on this, and from here what I would do is a master. Now I don't want to go too much into mastering because I do have a different video. Hopefully this helped. This is my exact process that I do every time that I mix. If you have any questions, please be sure to ask me. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And
behold, the sword of power.